Hey guys, it is August 20th, and we've got ourselves a Heroes of the Storm balance patch. It's a Friday, which is a little unusual. For the longest time, we had them on Wednesdays. We kind of shifted to Tuesdays. Now it seems like there's kind of less structure in when we're going to get balance patches, but at the same time, it still seems like we're getting them within about 4 weeks. So let's talk a little bit about this. So far, the biggest complaint has been Zagara. She's been so strong that they've actually had to turn her off yesterday from being able to be played in any game mode. So they need to nerf Zagara, but for the rest of it, a lot of people have felt that overall the heroes have been rather balanced. I mean, if we were to go into, let's say, heroes profile for a second, and we were to look at simply just win rates, and let's look at kind of the last couple patches if possible. If we were to look at like the last few patches, ignoring Zagara, nearly every other hero fits within a 5% window outside of Zag, Deckard, Genji, Hanzo, and Medivh. Now, these are all competitive heroes down here. They're just rather difficult to play. So seeing people below 45% is okay as long as they still are competitive in one way or another. If you buff Medivh up to a 50% win rate, no matter who plays him, then he will be generally too strong for the people that are really good at him or the teams that know how to coordinate with him. So other than that, this game is in a rather balanced state, seeing almost the entirety of the roster either within 5 points up or 5 points down in win rate, which is kind of similar to what we see in like League of Legends. I think they only have about a few above 52, 53%, and then same thing, their more difficult heroes tend to be sitting around that like 45-ish percent win rate. So with that being said, I would only really expect them to nerf potentially like the top win rate heroes, but you need to also look that like Kerrigan might not get a nerf just because she's only played in 4% of games. Instead, we would look at heroes with like this 40% win rate, this 40% popularity, the 62% popularity, the 97% popularity. Those are the ones that are going to be looked at the most. And if you're able to keep like a 97% popularity and have an above 50% win rate, there's usually something wrong. Heroes that are very popular should sit around 50%, really close to 50%, and generally a little lower than 50% because the more people that play it generally holds them back a little bit. The fewer people that play it, the more likely they're just the one tricks that decided to stick with that hero, whether they're strong or not. And those are where you see like Samuro with high win rate, Kerrigan with high win rate, as well as like potentially like getting into like the Phoenix and stuff. So that gives us an idea of what we might be expecting in these patches. So to start off, we do have a little bit of a Stitches nerf, very light to health nerf, as well as very light to like the slow amount and the slow amount here as well. Overall, they basically said, we're happy with Stitches, but we just want to drop down that stickiness. What stickiness basically means is that you can stick to the target a little bit better. Stickiness is usually when your character has easy slows or you have like movement speed that you can stick to them. So if you imagine like a tracer, if you're trying to run away from a tracer, it seems like she can kind of just stick to you wherever you want to go. And the only way to really get away from her is to either kill her or get in a place that she doesn't want to go, which is not always possible. And so the same thing's true with like Stitches. Is for a tank, he's surprisingly sticky because he can permanently slow you with every auto attack by 25%. Well, now it's 20%. And same thing, Pulverize slowed just enough to where he could get up to you so that he could permanently slow you. And so I think that's a pretty good change to Stitches. Overall, it shouldn't affect him too much in where he's played in the meta. Leoric. I think this is probably one of the more significant changes. What their initial plan was on Leoric was to give him Neil Peasants by default. And so what they did was they took the Neil Peasants used to be 100% more damage done to minions and mercs. And they would, minions, mercs, and monsters. I apologize. It was 100% more damage when he swung. Well, you didn't actually need that to double soak, but it certainly made it a little bit easier to double soak. Now it's default. It is just a baseline thing that you get as Leoric, but instead of 100%, it's 75%. Now, you can buff that up to 150%, and then an additional 75%. Oh no, it doesn't. Never mind. So it just activates for mercenaries and monsters. And then it also reduces the cost and cooldown. So as long as you hit 2 mercs or 2 monsters, you can reduce the cooldown of your Q by half. This is actually kind of interesting because it speeds up his cam clear a little bit. Now, I don't know by how much it speeds up his cam clear, but it seems like it would speed it up a pretty decent amount. And then also the crit bonus is being increased on his auto attack. So I would say before he didn't have a very reliable and fast way to do cams, and now I would say if you have someone to cover your lane, he should be able to do cams. And probably as the game gets a little bit later, he could also do camps on his own without needing a lane to be covered because he can still clear lanes very, very quickly. Overall, I don't think this will make too much of a difference. I think this will bump up his win rate a little bit in Storm League, but it'll probably put him around the same area in competitive. The one thing that I do think it'll do is Neil Peasants won't be as required in competitive, so we might see more talent variety, specifically like the increased range on Q. Deckard. We just saw Deckard's win rate was rather low for Storm League anyways, sitting at a 44%. So what they're trying to do is they're going to try to buff Deckard's ability in Storm League without buffing him too much in competitive. So they're making it to where his potions fly further faster, not the shortest range, but the middle and the far range fly a little bit faster. The heal amount is also going to be increased as well. The slow is being increased, and his level 1 quest has a completely new functionality. Instead of it leveling up to increase the vision and reduce the armor, it increases its damage, and then it decreases their armor. And so this is going to be significantly more damage than what it was before, or at least it could be significantly more damage. I think the increased damage by 2 is a little small, if you think about it, because it doesn't really you don't hit that many of these. I mean, throughout an entire game, you're probably going to hit maybe 30 stacks of this, which is 60 damage, and that damage does scale with your level 16 talent, but overall, it's a little limited. Level 4, Potion of Shielding is getting a buff. That was already the meta talent in the competitive scene. Rejuve Potion is getting a buff. This is a talent that I personally really liked because if the enemies had a lot of poke, their poke didn't always happen right when the shield was on there. So I personally like this talent for ARAMs and against a lot of poke. Level 10, Lornado additional functionality deals 20 damage per hit. It's not a lot, but it does hit quite a few times. Definitely pros and cons about that. Dealing damage could affect people that are getting hit. And what I mean by that is it could wake up someone if they're sleeping. I mean, I think the knockback already potentially does that, but damage can be good, can be bad when it's just like a small amount of damage. Level 13, Super Healing Potions being reduced a little bit. Additional functionality, passive potions heal for 25% more against heroes that are under 50% health. So that's going to be pretty strong. And that doesn't need to be the big version of it either. That could simply just be a small potion healing for more. Potion of Revival, area healings being increased, Ancient Blessings cooldowns being reduced. This is going to be really significant for competitive play. And I would prefer them to increase the radius rather than the actual AoE healing, because where I find the problem with this is if someone's going to walk up to pick up a potion, they're usually not close enough to another person to get healed. So if they increased the radius of this or made it to where when you picked up this potion, it would throw a couple smaller potions out further away, I would like that more than its current area, but that's perfectly fine. Overall, this is going to make Deckard even stronger in the competitive scene, seeing as he's going to be healing for more, healing faster, and you're also reducing the cooldown of what's basically a second ultimate ability for him. And so overall, I think that Deckard's going to see a lot more play in competitive, and I think this will bump up his win rate by a couple % in Storm League. Lieutenant Morales, we recently saw a rework on, and they felt like that probably still wasn't enough. They bumped up her health regen to compensate. Healing Beam is going to give more energy in between when you're not casting it. And Safeguard's going to give more armor. Trauma Trigger, the cooldown's being reduced, and Vanadium Plating, the armor is being reduced. And this armor reduction is just going to basically still come out to be the same because of Safeguard. So, Kira is also seeing a little bit of changes. So, Fatal Wounds quest is being reverted back down to 150. I don't know if you guys remember, but this quest went from, I believe, 125 to 150 to 200. Now it's going back down to 150. Ensnaring Sweeps slow is going from 40 to 60. Pulsing Pain is going from 115 to 135. Lingering Alignment. So, basically, they're just buffing her underutilized talents, the talents that people just generally aren't picking. Swing Life Away, and Utility Belt. These two compete with the AoE stun, and so it's hard to compete against that. Overall, I think that these changes won't make a major difference, but it will give her some build variety. Hanzo's health is being increased, health regen is being increased to compensate for the increased health. Natural agility cooldown is being reduced, so that's his trait to be able to jump around. Level 7, the Dragon Hungers, that's his Q. Duration increased from 10 to 12 seconds, so when you land your Q, it's going to increase your spell damage. Sharpened Arrowheads, armor reduction per stack is increased from 2 to 3. Maximum armor reduction remains 20, so it just stacks a tad bit faster. Gets a little awkward around the last stack, but that's okay. Dragon Strike, the center damage bonus is being increased from 50 to 75%. And so this is how they kind of explain it. Hanzo has become slowly a less reliable choice, and we see that in the win rates as well. So they've buffed Deckard and now Hanzo of the lowest win rates. Now Hanzo, even in the competitive scene, was starting to get outclassed a little bit, purely because what damage he could bring out, while it was a little bit safer because of his distance, it just wasn't quite the damage that someone like a Cassie could bring out. And then Cassia still kind of felt safe even with nearly half the range, purely because she had that extra armor and she had that self-healing, which made it to where Cassia almost just outclassed everything that Hanzo wanted to do. I think what Dragon Strike needs is not just this, but it needs to go out about half a second faster so that it can combo better with things like Entomb. Lunara, Hippity Hop, cooldowns being reduced, which is pretty good. It's a talent that's just, it really isn't picked too much anymore. Choking Pollen, damage against enemies with 3 stacks of Nature's Toxin is being increased from 150 to 200. This is a really powerful talent for bursting people before you hit level 10, which is something that Lunara really lacked. It felt like everyone always had to go Leaping Strike if you wanted any burst out of Lunara. So a lot of the Lunara 1 tricks and mains would switch over to Choking Pollen level 7 instead of the AoE damage so that they could have some burst potential. You lose a lot of the AoE applications of damage, but you do get a lot of burst potential to follow up your tank CC. Thornwood Vine, damage is being increased. Abolish Magic, cooldown is being reduced. And overall, basically, they're just doing what they can to add some build variety, but I do think that this is going to kind of push her ahead a little bit. She's not losing anything that she had before, and she is gaining more burst in the build that Lunara mains were already finding a lot of success in. Nazebo. Corpse Spiders, cooldown decreased from 9 to 8, so you can cast more spiders. Mana cost is being reduced. Widowmaker's new functionality, enemies hit by Corpse Spider's jar are slowed by 30%. After hitting heroes 100 times with your, after attacking heroes 100 times, Corpse Spiders deal 30% more damage. That should still be the same thing as what it was before. So your spiders should, it just takes a couple Qs to get this stacked up pretty well, as long as the enemies aren't running away too much. Pandemic, your E Toad talent. Now after hitting 80 heroes with Plague of Toads instead of 40, it reduces the hero's damage by 5, stacking up to 25%. I actually really like this a lot. And there's kind of something that's happening with Nazebo here, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but I think that there's a world where he's can be a little bit more of a bruiser now, as opposed to anything else. So, Blood Ritual, additional functionality, takedowns grant 5 stacks of Voodoo Ritual. So what Blood Ritual used to do, and what it still does, is it gives you extra health and mana that you'll heal whenever you were to get a stack of blood, or whenever you kill a minion or whatever that has a stack on it. Now you get extra stacks while you're in a team fight. So that could be really good because you get extra healing and mana during team fights, but if you get a lot of kills during team fights, or even just a lot of assists from throwing out toads throughout a game, you can stack up much faster, which kind of compensates a little bit between, do you want to have your stacks worth twice as much health and mana, or do you just want to get a lot more stacks faster? And so it could be kind of interesting to see how that evens out. It'll never be as much as the other talent, but at the same time, it might compensate a little bit for having a little bit less health and mana near the end of the game. Level 7, Spirit of Eric here, or Iraq here. New functionality, completely different. Corpse spider spawn an additional spider. If corpse spider's jar only hits one target, spawn an additional spider. So this is kind of just a redone version of what it was before. You hit a single target, it spawns 5 spiders instead of 3. Now you always spawn 4 spiders, and then if you only hit one, you get the 5th. I kind of like this change a little bit more. It makes it feel less of a punishment if you hit more than one target with your Q, but it also was kind of a fun mini game to figure out how you could only hit one minion. One of the things that I like to do was throw my Q at a minion that was alone, that was about to die, so the jar would basically kill the minion, and then 5 spiders would run after the nearest hero. So there's a lot of little gimmicks, and you can still do those gimmicks, but now it's just more consistent. Guardian Toad's stacks duration is being increased, max duration is being increased. That gives you armor when you hit people with your Toads. Superstition, additional functionality, heroic basic attacks that cancel spell armor. Will spawn a corpse spider to attack the heroes. That's kind of neat. Spider colony, additional functionality. Corpse spiders attacks against heroes also reduce the cooldown of corpse spiders by 0.125 seconds. So if you do land spiders, you'll get more spiders out. Homungoid, additional functionality. Your stomps increase the area is being increased by 25%. The slow is being increased to 50%. Annihilating Spirit now will reduce healing by 50%. Fury of the Storm has been removed from Nazebo, and now he has consumed 5 stacks of Voodoo Ritual, which is your trait. To become unstoppable, gain 20% movement speed and 50 armor. 30-second cooldown. So what I want to talk about a little bit is kind of an interesting idea of Nazebo for a long time has been kind of a secondary mage, and he lacks a little bit of the burst damage to be what you need to bring for a mage. So a lot of people have been running the Ravenous Spirit to account for the lack of burst damage. Your tank engages, you have enough burst damage to follow up by throwing out like a Q, and then a Ravenous Spirit, and that's a lot of burst, and it's a potential for leading to a kill or two. But what I almost feel like they're doing is, while they are buffing the Q build, it feels like E build with potentially like Blood Ritual is turning into more of a bruiser, where your goal is to lower the enemy's damage and just get stacks of Voodoo Ritual and get takedowns throughout fights while playing safe. And then instead of going for an ult that is there for damage, you'll already have a mage. You could potentially run into the fight and have armor and have movement speed, and you can run in and try to play really aggressive with your zombie walls. So you could reduce everyone's damage, play aggressive with zombie walls, and if anything happens, you can pop unstoppable, have armor, and get out of just about anything. I think that's a possibility to have a build like that, but I do think with everything that they've done, it's going to encourage people to go more back into the spider build just because it's a lot more consistent than it used to be, then try to go more of that bruiser build. But I do think it's interesting to see them trying to do something with Nazebo. Finally, we have Vala. Vala's arsenal damage is being reduced from 120 down to 100. Hot Pursuit's movement speed is being reduced from potential of 25% down to 20%. Gloom, healing per second reduced from 2.5 to 1.25. Healing per second now scales with level. Passive spell armor is being reduced. Death Siphon. Remove functionality. Penetrating bolts no longer heals Vala for the damage dealt. So you can still last a long time in the Death Siphon, but it's no longer siphoning. So they might want to change the name of that. But that's okay. And I said finally, but we also have Zagara. Zagara has been kind of a bane. I didn't really mention much of this. I think she's going to be finally pretty balanced right now, but then she gets still down to that area of where she's low range and squishy, but she does do a lot of damage. Zagara has been a dominant force. Her win rate jumped up to about 67% in this last patch, which is higher than we've seen most heroes in the game ever reach. So Zagara has definitely been in a really good spot. Well, sorry, has been overpowered. We're hoping that Zagara will get in a better spot now after this patch. They're reducing her health regen to compensate, her basic attack damage by a little bit. Her Baneling Barrage is going to be doing less damage with a longer cooldown as well as a larger mana cost. Her Volatile Acid, it's no longer going to increase Baneling Barrage's damage, only will increase the range. Her Baneling Massacre no longer is going to reduce the cooldown, but now it's going to increase the cooldown. And then her Pact Instinct to level 20 is also being nerfed. Here's what I'll say. These changes should make it a little bit better. And I do think that this will bring her down quite a bit. Maybe even make her weak. What I mean by that is weaker than average for heroes in the meta. She still does kind of that annoying poking from range, but she won't have as much damage because you're going to be losing damage here, and you're going to be losing the. You'll have the burst, but you won't have the sustain from this anymore because of the cooldowns. I don't think they should have hit every single piece separately like this, because it's hard to track what's actually making a difference. What I mean by that is, if you are doing a study and you want to see what is changing a hero's win rate, and you usually want to reduce the variables down to a few things. If you lower the damage, you can see, okay, well, it's the damage. If you lower the damage and the win rate doesn't change, you go, oh, it's the utility that the hero has. We might need to change the cooldowns or the stun duration. And so you usually want to separate the variables to where you're only affecting so many variables. My concern with a wide-ranging nerf like this is it may turn out like W build Falstad, where his win rate goes from like 65% down to like 44%. And just gets right underneath what's viable for that build. Especially for an easy build. Easy builds should have higher win rates than 50% because they're easy to pick up on anyone, and the skill floor is low enough that they should be doing better. Difficult builds should naturally have lower than a 40 or 48% win rate, because if someone's good at that build, then they're going to be at like a 52% win rate. Now, if it's really easy, then the people that are good at the builds are going to be significantly higher win rate. Well, my concern with this is we're nerfing too many different things at once, and it's hard to view what is actually the problem. This change alone and this change alone might have been enough that none of this was required. And why I say that is because you had a talent here that gave you 2 additional charges of Baneling Barrage and also reduced the cooldown by 0.5 seconds. Well, now you're not only removing one of the benefits of this, but you're also creating a negative on this talent. So now you have burst, but you don't have sustain. That is pretty bad as far as, I mean, it would be normally a good trade-off, right? So if you made just this change, you now are making the decision of, okay, our Q is now burst, but we don't have sustain. That's a good talent. The problem is that you're also reducing the damage here and reducing the damage here. So that's going to significantly reduce the burst and also the sustain. And we're also lowering her health. So where she was this long range mage where you could block a lot of her damage, kind of like a Li Ming, she was a Li Ming that didn't have mobility. So if you jumped on her, you could stick on her and take her out. Where now, with the health being reduced, you're kind of getting her closer to where Li Ming is, but Li Ming's just going to outclass her eventually, because Li Ming has mobility. And Li Ming's abilities are a little bit faster than Zagara's abilities. And so the problem when you create characters that are too similar to each other, even though they seem very, very different, the problem is that you end up creating heroes that outclass each other. So I almost feel like they don't know what they want out of Zagara. And so they're just kind of over buffing and over nerfing her until they figure it out. I think that if they didn't do all of this, then the auto attack build probably still would have been a little bit better of an option. But with her health being reduced and her auto attack damage being reduced, even though the only build that she was really dominant on was that Q build, if we were to go to Zagara and we were to look at like her talent win rates, you can see Q has 10% more win rate than either of her other talents. And when we look at either of the tiers that have this, again, Q has a significantly higher win rate than any of other talents. So when I'm looking at talents that are auto attack based, you can see that their win rates are significantly lower. So her auto attack build was actually probably balanced. And so to see them nerfing her auto attack build and her health, even though those were probably balanced, kind of scares me a little bit, because it just seems like they don't really know what the problem is. Now, this isn't me trashing the team. I'm not a balance manager. I'm not a a hero designer. I'm not on the balance team. I just am giving my own personal opinion for what it's worth whenever they do overbuff and overnerf heroes. I do think that this will drop Zagara down. She won't be overpowered anymore. But I do wonder if this was too much and if it gets back to the point where very few people are playing Zagara. I have heard from some people, and they said that she still feels pretty strong since this change. I have not played her yet. I just barely kind of got out of some meetings and had time to do this. So I haven't had time to play her yet. But that being said, take it all, everything that I've said today with a grain of salt on just my opinions on this. Also, I feel like this health regen nerf is more than the health nerf, right? Because I mean, this is closer to a 20% nerf. It's like 17% or something. Where this is like a 20% nerf on this would be 300 health being reduced. So that they really are going to hit her health regen pretty hard here. But that's okay. So we'll see how it goes, and I'm sure they can buff her back up. But I think they're, from my experience anyways, they've been afraid to buff people that they've over nerfed. And the best example of that would be like W build Falstad. It is an easy to play build with a very low skill floor and skill ceiling. To see it not over 50% feels weird. And seeing it as a lot of the win rates on it are sitting around 45%, I feel like a little concerned about how they're approaching when they overnerf something. All of that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think about the changes down below. Who do you think got kind of the biggest buff? Who do you think got the biggest nerf? If I was to kind of say it myself, I think in the competitive scene, Deckard got the biggest buff. I would say outside the competitive scene, potentially Leoric or Nazebo. And then as far as the biggest nerf, 100% Zagara definitely got that nerf. So thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to check out my other videos.